Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we are looking at some more stuff past the developers of March 2020. This video is going to have a look at the mechanics which are on display, so pretty much the stuff such as changes that people want to see to the game, new game modes, and even some sound stuff today. Another thing, right now on my Twitch, which you can find a link to in the description below, I will be playing some of the new Mount and Blade Bannerlord, looking very much forward to it, so make sure to check it out there. Anyway, let's get started. The first thing is from Poir Desu, and this is talking about a completely new game mode which would add in a ton of facets, which would be incredibly entertaining, but also I have no idea how the hell you would balance it from the current maps that we have. So, the name of this idea is Frontline. The idea is a combined warfare game mode, and it bases its identity around the maps that we have in-game, and also the size that we also have in-game. So the main characteristics of this game mode, if you want to have a look down here, 24 to 32 players on a team, large maps only, so Fulda is used as an example in this piece, and then also, when it comes to it, 3 dedicated bomber slots, 4 individuals, and then 5 to 7 dedicated plane slots, and all the rest are going to be ground forces. So once again, limiting player choice in order to try and sort out some balance stuff. Also, 45 seconds before the battle starts, people pick what they want to actually play in the battle. So I'm guessing it'll work on a first-picked, first-served basis, otherwise there might be a few people that are annoyed, but the main thing to understand here is you know, what's going on. You also have 2 separate lineups, one for ground and one for air, and you have a main lineup and a secondary lineup, and either your air lineup or your ground lineup can be your main lineup, and what happens there is with those units, you don't have to pay their spawn costs. You're only limited to the amount of respawns you can do instead of spawn points. Which of course may be an issue. Also, the matchmaking would operate without any nation lock, and also would create a match based on what nations are the most convenient to build a team from the players pool, whatever that means. So anyway, we're going to use Fulda as an example, and I'm just going to go through this one because there's just so much to it. You know, it's a kind of crazy concept because there's a lot going on, so it's better just to show you it through the article itself. So the first concept is supply bases, but it isn't really the core concept that it's based around. Instead, it's actually based around the front line itself, but the supply bases are how you lose tickets or gain tickets as you go along. As it says here, there are 2 ways of winning or losing this battle. The enemy team has no vehicles left, or the enemy team runs out of tickets. So exactly the same as we have in normal battles. And apart from, you know, getting rid of the domination part, but that is pretty much, you know, the enemy team losing all their tickets because they've lost, you know, the domination zones. So both teams start with 24,000 or 32,000 tickets, and then if you capture the hostile bases that you can see on this map, then ticket bleed starts pretty much, and the more bases you have, the more ticket bleed is on the enemy, so therefore it makes you need to capture those supply bases in order to create the ticket bleed. And then there's this intelligence idea, which is designed to give the player more intelligence of what is going on. So the streamlined intelligence, it is just designed to try and tell you what's going on the map, but without giving the player as much information as possible, and this is where it gets a little bit dodgy, right? So you can see here we have 2 separate sectors. So you have the what the server sees and what the client tracks as friendly controlled areas in a grid system, and then when it comes to the player themselves, the player actually sees kind of a frontline-esque idea, so very similar to what we see in Enduring Confrontation, apart from it is much more flexible instead of the rigid grid squares that we have here. And how you capture these grid squares is a little bit all over the place, if I'm kind of honest. So the first thing is, in order to capture a grid square and push forward your front line, what you have to do is you have to have an area which is adjacent to a controlled area. Makes sense. Their area needs to have continuously at least one friendly vehicle in the area for 15 seconds. Once again, makes sense. The area is considered captured if no hostile vehicles are spotted within it. Now this is the key thing. You can still have hostile vehicles in the sector, but they're just not seen. So, therefore, you can capture the sector even if, enemy vehicles are present. And, as it says, if an enemy tank was already there or pushed into that area without being seen, their position will not be given away, and the client won't change the front line until they have been seen. The lack of accuracy in the frontline drawing is deliberate. The whole point of drawing a frontline is to continuously give players a global picture of the battle, not a detailed, omniscient view. The motive behind that is to reduce the amount of deaths from unawareness, apart from the fact that you won't be able to see the people. But anyway, so you have individual units intelligence, and this comes down to each side knowing how many vehicles are on each side of the game, but this is only stuff which you have identified. So if there is a bunch of hidden enemies, then you don't know what is going on with them, and they're not spotted on the map, or you haven't identified them using a scout or using some aerial stuff. So pretty much this gives you a rough idea of what is in the area, but it doesn't give you a full picture. Instead, it just gives you some light intelligence instead of going on. You can see here in this picture, it's set up how much of the enemies are in the area, but you don't know exactly what the enemies are. You only know what types, and also you don't know all of the enemies because of the fact of the matter being that it's not, it's all based around the spotting mechanic and how much, people have actually seen or targeted on the map or scouted. And then there's a bunch of new gameplay mechanics. So the first one is everyone can help repair their teammates. So everyone can repair everyone. The time saved by a light tank, though, is twice as much as other classes. So light tanks, it takes only half the time to repair vehicles. Vehicles using the same ammunition can actually share with each other, which is interesting. The scouting mechanics for light tanks have also been slightly modified. We'll go into that. And light tanks can also set up respawn beacons. Main lineup ideas introduced that we talked about before. The system of spawn points is removed for the main lineup, so you don't have to pay for vehicles to bring in, and manually formed squads can draw on the minimap. So pretty much what that means is if you have a map like this, and you want to tell your squad where to go, instead of having to communicate verbally, you can be like, okay, we're going this way. You know what I mean? And being able to draw. I think that's a nice idea. It would be nice to see if that was ever implemented into War Thunder. So it talks about the ammunition sharing part. Pretty simple, click on a vehicle, put a mount, and then chuck it. And then the next thing would be the scouting mechanic changes. So pretty much what the poster wants to do is similarly to how it currently works. Light tanks would have to use their binoculars hit the target by hitting a button. While the target is in the center of the crosshair to scout it, the margin of error of the radius would be about 3 meters around each vehicle to account for ping and other issues that would decrease accuracy and wrongly result in a failed scouting. Each successful scout gives a 10-second cooldown to the scout before using its scout again. Failed scouting also gives a 10-second cooldown to account for bugs of cases where the target gets destroyed, now just before the scout using their scouting ability. However, to prevent abuse, each consecutive failed scout is an additional 15 seconds on top of the initial 10. Scouting has no maximum range, but in practice gets increasingly harder as it becomes more and more difficult to accurately put your crosshair on a faraway vehicle, and the quality of the intelligence depends on the distance. So you actually get different intelligence depending on how far the target is away, and you can go through all of the differences there. And it's pretty much, it all goes around the minimap and how it works, and the further away the target is, the lower the blip rate, let's call it that. The lower the ping pong between where the target is and where you are is, and then when they get closer close to you, they're pretty much just constantly on the map. Then there's the respawn beacons that we talked about before. So this is pretty much just for light tanks. This is so it would reduce the time needed for tanks to get to the battlefield, so people could actually respawn right on the front line instead of having to spawn and then, walk up to it. So light tanks would put down these beacons, and spawn beacons have a physical medium profile appearance that can easily be recognized, and because of this, light tanks will have to research more secure spots than flat cornfields to set up a beacon. The beacon is physical for one reason, to be destructible, and what it does is a beacon can be set mostly anywhere within the friendly controlled zone, but will however become inactive if too close to frontline or not anymore in the control zone at all. However, if the enemy team fails to locate, take care of the respawn beacon, and your team gets back control of the zone and its surroundings, the beacon will become active again. So it's just it's a respawn point that you can push around the place. It's kind of as simple as that. Now, we talked about the two lineup mechanic before. There's also a few other things such as noise reduction, which is being thought about how to fix, and then the map control mechanic, so you can see how it would work in general. So you have the bit that you control, the technical frontline area, and then you have the rest of it, which is obviously not being controlled. And then you have the offensive line suggestion, so the game or your team can kind of work out where you want to push forward, and then you push forward as a team and all of that good stuff. And then air to air, air to ground, ground to air. This is basically a way of making sure that aircraft don't come in the first minute of a battle and nuke all of the tanks, and making sure that you have an actual air battle beforehand. You battle for air superiority, and then you can bring in stuff like the ground attackers to be able to go after tanks and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty much as simple as that. It's to make it so the game isn't unbalanced, as it always will be, because planes are superior to tanks. Then there's a bunch of new rewards, and then this is how supply bases work. So supply bases, even though the main, you have the ticket bleed from the domination map itself, but also the supply bases, the main reason why they're there is so they can resupply everything. So shells, bullets, crew members, fire extinguishers, smoke grenades, whatever you want to happen on this mode, you can also do it. You can also do it through supply trucks, which give incoming ammunition sharing abilities, which is really nice. And there's also a bunch of other stuff as well. Then he's even thought about competitive frontline and changing it, so therefore it will be, slightly different to the normal frontline. For me personally, this game mode, after reading through it about 5 times, I think I completely understand it, but at the same time, it has the same inherent issues that every other game mode has, that it will be dominated by one type of vehicle, and then the meta will set up, and the maps are just not big enough for what this wants to create, and at the same time, there's just going to be ways to game the system, just like there is in Naval EC and also Air RB EC. There's also been an FAQ, and the first answer is quite funny. This game mode is very unlikely to work without further research, experimentation, changes based on the results. On top of that, other players already suggested new game modes, notably the Domination ++ one, which is what we went through. But yeah, it's nice to see that Poadesu has realized that there is going to be kinks in this, there are going to be issues with this, and even though there's a lot of detail in this post and how it all works and how it would work on a fundamental level, it is nice to know that there is a little bit of humility there, instead of being like, yes, this idea is going to work, everything is perfect, blah blah blah, which is what you hear out of a lot of people. For me, it's just nice to see, yeah, there might be a few issues, and maybe there's a few problems. If we're comparing this to the Domination ++ one, I prefer the Domination ++ one, apart from the Domination ++ one's inherent issue, which is you can tell where the enemy team is going, so therefore you can just set up ambushes constantly. But yeah, anyway, moving on to the next one. This is from Red Lines Burn, and they're talking about some quality of life improvements to the game for stock vehicles. The first one is a field repair change, and this is pretty much being able to get a decent repair or a half repair in order to get to a cap point to get a full repair. Now, we already have this in game, and remember, this post was made in September the 12th, 2018, so I don't blame this post for being out of date, but at least from the field repair point of view, we have this in arcade, and we also have this in realistic. I'm not sure if there is it in simulator, but at least in those other two game modes, if you have, let's say, say, a blacked out engine, you can semi-repair it to get it back to a cap point in order to be able to repair it. So that bit's, sorted. The next bit is the handheld FPE. And this is just basically an FPE with a single shot, but it takes longer to put out the fire while disabling the crew for the tank for the longer duration. So therefore, it's just to make it so there is less of a difference between having no FPE and actually having the modification research. And I've talked about this for a long time. I would rather have FPE be stock on a vehicle, and then the modification makes it either slightly quicker to be able to put out, or gives you the ability to actually reload it on capture points. I think that would be much more fair, and as a general rule for me, one of the worst issues in War Thunder that has been since its existence is the difference between a stock and a spaded vehicle. So any changes to the game which can make that a little bit less for the majority of people, I agree with that, and this is one of those changes. The next one is for the Huey, the Huey banging sound. Now, I don't know personally, I watched this video. I'm not sure what Pagan Min is talking about here, but basically for him, when it comes to the Huey, he used to have them like fly over his hometown quite a lot, and for him, when the Huey's coming towards you, the actual helicopter makes a specific sound which is unique to it, and it's something to do with the collection of the engine and how it actually flies, and it has this like banging sound which it makes as it goes past, and so he just wants that added to the game, and I don't think that would be, a terrible addition. As long as it's realistic and historical, it would be lovely to see. And the last one is from Mesa. And Mesa just wants a more realistic experience of setting off during an ARB takeoff. And this is actually because of an issue that he ran into in the game. So in a game, he actually spawned late in ARB on Kursk, and because he spawned in late, there was a fighter or something around his airfield, and that set off all the sirens around his airfield. And for him personally, he felt like he was more engrossed in the experience with all of these noises going on when he was taking off. And I actually remember when, after reading this post, it reminded me of something that happened to me as well. And what happened with me was on the event Pearl Harbor, which there used to be, where it was Japan versus America, when you took off for the first time as America, there was a ton of explosions everywhere, there was a ton of stuff going on, it was a little bit manic to try and represent what it would have been like at Pearl Harbor, and I always thought that was really cool in War Thunder that they added that in. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if they added more stuff like that to just normal ARB battles? Like, I know in stuff like World of Tanks, right? In World of Tanks, when you start, a game and you're in that bit where it's just letting people load in, for 30 seconds or whatever it is at the start of the battle, you hear engines turning on. You hear, like, people start rumbling. And it's just kind of a nice, little issue of environmental sounds just as you get into the game. And as someone who also really enjoys a lot of the documentaries and movies and stuff around Battle of Britain, of course, one of the large things when it comes to getting aircraft into the air is, of course, the scramble, and then all of the noises that are associated with that, also all of the, the air raid sirens. I think it would be really nice to have that in-game in some capacity. So that is the mechanics for March 2020. Not a ton of stuff, but a very in-depth look at a new game mode, and I would definitely say go and read it, because it's very hard to do justice in a video. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.